Today is Wednesday, February 15th. I'm one of your hosts, Todd Walters. With me is Brad Staley, the Big Bass Bash tournament director, also Angler's Choice tournament director.
BBB, baby, doing things.
Big Bass Bash.
This meeting is being recorded.
It
Got
is.
it.
So we're rolling.
Huh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Make sure last time, remember, we had to re-record because I missed the whole half
The
of it.
last time we had our special guest tonight on.
Yep. We got North Carolina fisheries biologist Seth. Can't ever think of his last name. Mycko. I want to say micro like, for some reason.
Mycko.
Yep. So he'll be on. We're going to talk. We got some questions on Facebook about grass or not to have grass and some other questions.
You definitely, I actually was reading some of those earlier, and that's probably one of your most I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Most
you okay, dude?
I'm there.
You sure?
Yeah, the most action you've gotten out of a post, the most yeah. There you go.
Most attention?
Whatever. Still not the right word, but I'll think of it.
I don't think you will. So what's new? What's going on? What's going on in the fishing world? So they're on Okeechobee at the Elites, and they're on the Kissimmee chain for the Bass Pro Tour. I just got back from Okeechobee last week and had a horrible first day, but did catch them the second day and came back and got right back into it. That was huge. I can't express to you how important that is to get things going, because I started the year off last year pretty bad. Had a 2-minute penalty for being 2 minutes late for the first time ever, and then did get a Harris chain and did decent at Pickwick, and then had a great first day at Gunnersville, and then it just went to hell the rest of the season.
That was that's right. Y'all went to Texas first last year. I was thinking y'all started at Harris, but y'all went to Texas. That's when you had a 2-minute penalty. In that tournament, you were in like the 60s or something with a penalty, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Would have been a check for sure, and would have put me, points wise, would have raised me up about 23, 24 places. It's just, I say this all the time, the margin for error is just, it's non-existent. You cannot make mistakes. And that goes for everything. Dead fish. It's pretty anybody who tournament fishes, which probably 99.9% of the people that listen to this do, know exactly what I'm talking about. I know you do, Brad Staley.
Show.
What's going on in your world?
Not much. Just looking at the results from down there today. They caught them okay. Took 12 to make the cut, like we said, before we went on. So it's interesting to me, the different formats and kind of what it takes. You always look at a lake, and in the springtime, like a BFL or something like that, I feel like if a lake is any good at all, it should take 12 pounds to get a check. If it's any count at all, if it doesn't take 12 pounds in the spring to get a check, there's usually some kind of issues. Like y'all's event, it took 30 to get a check. So that was showing you how good Okeechobee was fishing to take 15 pounds a day to get paid. That's solid.
We hit it just right.
Yeah, it's very good.
I mean, you look at how many 5 and 6 pound fish were weighed in. I mean, dude, we hit it just right. Like the day off, a lot changed and a lot of fish moved, but the guys that knew where they spawned. What amazes me, dude, is how much Okeechobee has changed from 2 years ago, which was the last time I was there, to this time. It is absolutely completely different. The areas where I caught, I mean, you might as well just, it's nice to have your trails so you know where to run, but you might as well just delete all your waypoints as soon as you're done with that tournament. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've been down there 3 or 4 times, and it's never been the same. It's always completely different every year we go. And it's so much is dependent on the water level down there, just how much it is, because it's so flat. 6 inches of water makes a big difference of what's in play, what's not in play. So it's interesting.
What was amazing is the areas that I fished. You could only fish 3 areas. You could fish like Moonshine Bay and the Monkey Box. You could fish North Shore. You could fish South Bay. as far as I could tell, that's where the majority of the people were. I would say, 85% of the people were. But it's, it's Florida fishing. So if you have any doubts about if you're catching them or not, look around you. If there's no boats, you probably want to move. But I guess there was a hurricane last year or the year before. So it's been 2 years. It was the water was 10 inches higher this time. And areas that I had fished before were just, blown out. You had to be in a protected area for the most part. But that I believe it's the same group of fish that just move around, just giant school of fish. But the areas that we fished, you couldn't even get to last time. It was a gigantic reed patch, probably about, I don't know, at least 50 acres. It was a lot. There was probably, 15, 20 boats in that area, and nobody was on top of each other. So,
So like nobody,
go ahead.
so nobody was really fishing main lake stuff. They were going back in the reeds to get the clear water.
Right. So the day we got there, it blew when it was warm. It stayed warm pretty much the entire time. We had rain one day during practice, and then the off day it got even warmer, and I think it was 88 degrees the last day of the tournament. So it was like, it was trending in the right direction. The water temperature was going up, and those fish just moved up and were, but there's just big females everywhere. It was crazy because practice was tough. I never found, this is the honest to God's truth. I fished North Shore, and I found areas where I felt like I could catch fish. There was a bunch of boats around. The water looked right. You could see, that there was the guide boats were there, stuff like that. So I knew there was fish in the area. So I didn't spend a lot of time there because I was pretty familiar with that area, and I could run around in there and move around and stuff. And then I went to South Bay and had a really bad day of practice. And I just made the decision that third day of practice, I'm going to go up North Shore and just find some of those little hidden areas, protected areas where the water's a little clearer. I found some hydrilla, which I didn't find at all last time. And it was about noon, and I'm like, man, I got to check South Bay one more time. So I put the boat on the trailer and drove around, put in at Lewiston, and rode down to South Bay, and it still sucked, and I still didn't catch him. And then the last 45 minutes of practice, I pulled up on this reed patch. I called Martin just to see where he was at, because he was in South Bay too, just to see if he was catching them. And I pulled over, and the water was dirty. It was close to that area where all those fish were caught. And I had like 8 to 10 bites in the last hour on a chatterbait, and the water wasn't even clear. So I just figured those fish were just pulling up because they were all palish, they were all fresh looking. They were pretty fish. And I'm like, all these fish are moving up. Well, first day of tournament, after I lost that big one, I still had bites. I had 8 bites that day, and I only caught 4 of them that I know of. It was super windy, and I didn't throw moving baits enough. I kept trying to pitch that damn Senko. And if you're 6 inches to the right or 6 inches to the left, you won't get bit. Like, you had to put it right on it, because that's where they bed, right around the base of those reeds. And they were swarming that chatterbait, and I didn't throw it enough. That's what killed me. Second day, that's what I caught most of them on, was chatterbait. I had a 6.5, a 5.5, and a 4.5.
Did you throwing it Texas rig Tinko?
Yes, just flipping it to the reed clumps. And that's what I had that big one on the first day. I pitched in there, and I couldn't feel, and she went the other way. I set the hook. I could feel like it was rubbing on something like a lot. And when she pulled, I let her go, and she was around those reeds. She jumped on the other side, and then she pulled down one more time and just broke my line, I guess, on those reeds. I was using fluorocarbon too. I know a lot of guys flip with braid, and I'm probably dumb for not doing it, but I feel like I get more bites on fluorocarbon no matter what. I feel like I'm more accurate with it. It's easier to manage, especially in the wind. I don't know.
That's what I was going to ask you, what your setup was and how you do. Because I know this has been like 10, 12 years ago. I was down there, but the skinny dippers had just come out, and I was
Mm-hmm.
in monkey box, and it was, there was whatever, a third of the field was in there. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't fish in there the first day. I come back in there for like the last 30 minutes and cold too. And so I just went in there the second day and hung out. But my co-angler fish was somebody that was in there the first day, and they bit really good. Massive cold front come through or whatever. So it was really tough the next day. I was throwing a skinny dipper on 20-pound fluorocarbon, and he was throwing a skinny dipper on braid. I caught 16 pounds a day, and he never had a bite. And he's like, dude, what are you doing? What is
I
different?
swear they can hear it. It's more than them seeing it, but when you pull it against those reeds,
Yeah.
or no matter where you throw in there, especially when the wind blows and you can't really be accurate, I swear they hear it. Like it's just you can feel it on your rod. You can feel it like grrr, like it's rubbing on stuff. I swear they can. I swear they can
Well,
feel
think
that.
about this. So, like when you're a kid and you hold two cans together and you have the string is tight, you can hear noise through both sides of it. So you hear the braid when it comes through your guides on your rod. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
very loud and noisy. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you would think that would transfer through the line into the water potentially, and
Yeah. Where I think it doesn't hurt you is like punching and stuff, because that's such a quick bite. Like, and you're
it's all
going
reaction.
straight down too,
Yeah.
instead of dragging it through something. But the other thing too with spinning gear, everybody, well, most people throw braid with fluorocarbon leader, and you could hear that braid just coming through the guides, even with that lower pound test, and with that 60 or 80 pound line, you can still I swear they can feel it. They can like sense it moving through the water.
What kind of rod and stuff were you flipping? Like close quarter stuff in Florida with?
7.4 blues heavy rod with, I ended up using 22 pound shooter fluorocarbon, just because it was windy and I wanted it to be as sensitive as I could, because they weren't biting real good, like aggressively either. A lot of the bites I got during practice, like I'd pitch in there and I did a lot of flipping. I threw some moving baits too, but it's funny that you mentioned the skinny dipper, because that milf, I think it was hydrilla that I found in the north end, like everybody was flipping around that North Shore area, and there was a ton of boats in there. But everybody was flipping, and I looked out into the ditches on live scope, and I could see some fish out there. And what I ended up doing was doing that little skinny dipper, the Houdini skinny dipper with underspin, Texas rig underspin. You know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
With a weight on it, the hook with a weight and a spinner on it, and Texas rigged it and ran it over that hydrilla. And I ended up getting like 3 bites real quickly. So that's where I was going to fish if I didn't have that last little flurry on the third day of practice, which I'm glad I did. I just knew those fish were going to be in South Bay. I just knew they were going to be. That's why I had
So
to
the
go down there.
whole western side of the lake was just nothing, just junk over there.
No,
No, I'm sorry, the eastern side of the
eastern
lake. I'm
the
sorry.
eastern side
Yeah.
always sucks. Rumpahoki and all that stuff from Pelican Bay. Pelican Bay was a mess. Um, the South Bay wasn't even that great. There were some areas where, like the area that I'm talking about, was a big flat where the reeds were basically cut down at water level, and it's almost like a giant pond in the middle. There's little ways to get to it, but you're trolling motoring through, and you can see some of it was, you could see how deep it was in there by if you could see the reeds or not. If you could see the reeds sticking out of the water, you knew it was like 2.5 feet deep. If you didn't see them, you knew that's where the ditches were, and it was like 4 feet deep there. So, but you could look out with live scope, and I could see where the ditches were. And in the morning, I tried to catch them in the ditches, but they were, I think I tried to stay out of everybody's way. After having such a bad first day, and I've said this before, when you fish by yourself in an area where there's a bunch of boats, and they were moving around pretty good, and disturbing the area. So I went upwind, power pole down. I would fan cast, and then I would power pole up, drift another 50 yards, power pole down, or 50 feet, power pole down, pick it apart again, and then find the thicker, they were in the thicker reed clumps, and I caught them on a chatterbait. But I noticed that first thing, I'm like, it's thicker here. I'll bet you I catch one here. And that's when I caught my first big one, was 4.5. I'm like, this is where they gotta be. They're pushing them right to me.
So you're just winding it by the clumps.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
was
Was
just, there were guys that were
anybody?
flipping. There were guys that were but a lot of movement based swim jigs. I know Michael Neal was throwing a swim jig. He's throwing a swim jig, half-ounce swim jig on 80-pound braid.
Anybody in your area make the top 10?
Yeah, Brett Hite did, David Walker did. I mean, all those guys, they smashed them the first day. I was just outside of there. And Taya was there. There was probably about, in and out of the day, probably 25 boats that came in there.
Yep, that's typical Florida fishing, typical grass fishing in general. If you're not around, if you don't see any boats, you need to move.
The thing that I learned, which this time, I mean, if there's guide boats there, if there's a guide boat or two, there's fish there. It's the easiest, sucks to say that. And I love finding fish on my own, but if you're having trouble, you're struggling, if you're in Florida, look where the guide boats are. That'll tell you where the fish are. Same thing at Headwaters. We went down there and fished Headwaters and Garcia before we went over to Okeechobee. And same thing at Headwaters. I mean, I could tell where the boats were or where the guide boats were sitting. I'm like, okay, have you ever fished there?
No.
It's a flooded orange grove, old orange grove. So it's like, if you look at it on Google Earth, it doesn't even really look like a lake. It looks like a piece of land, but it's we didn't get it on a good week. I guess the week before we were there, man, they freaking smashed them. They said they had several over 10, including like a 12-8, a bunch of 11. So they're in there. They're just extremely hard to catch. I think so, most of the guys caught them on shiners, but you see where the guide boats are. It's crazy. There's these little ditches that run out. It's like a main spine that runs down the middle of the lake, and then off to the left and off to the right, or east and west, there's these ditches, and you can see where the orange trees used to grow. And it's a cool place, man. Very cool place. And there's so much grass. It's hard to move around.
Winyah Bay, I guess that's how you say it, down there in South Carolina, where the elites have fished at several times, but a lot of what they're fishing down there is old rice fields that's been flooded. It's kind of neat.
Same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Similar anyway.
Yeah. So you leave to go to Clarks Hill next week, I think?
Thursday, yep.
You going anywhere before you go to Clarks Hill, or are you just going straight down and start fishing practice?
No, I'm just going straight down to Clarks Hill. I mean, we barely had any time off. I got home last Friday. Got home last Friday and home for 10 days, and then I'm gone again. But fishing Florida, man, it's just, they're all different, but Florida bass are very, very different. And I posted this on my Facebook page. Like, I'm learning more about their behavior because they're very different. So, same thing with spotted bass. Spotted bass are very different too.
Florida always interested me. Just found it's weird that, like, you put the water down there this time of the year and just say it's 58, something like that, water temperature. And like, those fish are just not active. Like, that water would get like 62, the sun would come out, and just things would start happening. Like, they would get so much more active. Like, the afternoon fishing for me has always been much better in Florida than first thing in the morning.
Yep. And guys, you talked about it, late in the first day, and I kept watching the water temperature, and I think it was 67 in the morning, both mornings. And I just kept waiting and kept waiting. I'm like, it's going to hit 70, and it's going to trigger these fish. Cause I could see them. I could see them on live scope around those reeds. They were just being weird that day. I think I should have definitely should have went for more of a reaction bait, but anyway.
You live and you learn. It's tough. Yeah.
I would love to. So, I was told that if you right now is like, he's like, my buddy's like, well, I don't know why they keep bringing us down here at this time of the year. If you come in like April, May, and June, when it starts to get really hot, he's like, this place can be nasty. I mean, you can catch them, and you catch them on, like, moving stuff, skinny dippers, frogs, because the grass starts to get up, the water temperature starts to get above 80, and they get really aggressive.
Yeah, that's what I've always heard. I used to know a guy down there, and he would tell us about, if they would come in like March and April, that's when it was like the bed fishing bags were just massive because the bigger fish have lived through all the cold fronts, and they would wait till later in the year before they move up. He said that's whenever you would see like 40-pound bags down there.
Yeah.
But and I know, Inman's got that place at Harris Chain, and he acts like in like June, it's just unreal catching them
Yeah.
on top.
Yeah. Yep. They're super aggressive, but it's amazing. Like that, and there's, after spring break, the bass fishing starts to taper off a little bit in Florida, just because, I mean, dude, driving through Headwaters parking lot where bass boats from, I think the guy told me there's like 45 of the states have been accounted for this year at Headwaters.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah, I was watching them.
there's bass boats everywhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. And so what's very interesting to me about that? So when you go to Florida, that's all you see is bass boats. But you go up north in the summertime and
Mm-hmm.
you don't see any bass boats unless they're
No.
there for the tournament. Like
Yep.
all you see is walleye boats and big water boats, and nobody's bass fishing. They're all like
Yeah.
walleye fishing, trout fishing, whatever.
Yep.
They're fishing for something for food.
Yeah.
Nobody cares anything about bass fishing up there, and that's why it's so great.
Yeah. Well, some do, but it's just not as prevalent as it is here. You can only do it for 3 months out of the year, really. I mean, I think bass season opens the third Saturday in June. You can fish June, July, August, September, and then October. But by that time, everybody's hunting. So I used
Don't
to
they
go.
let
I used to go out on a lake during the week. I'd be the only bass boat on the lake, and
Yeah, I
we're
used to
talking
do
about
that
big
here.
lakes, like big lakes.
Yeah. I used to do that here, and that stopped a long time ago.
Yeah, it stopped for sure. I used to be able to go to Blues and be the only boat out there during the week. That
Yeah,
doesn't
that don't
happen
happen
anymore.
anymore.
Uh-uh.
It better be
Uh,
a cold, rainy, nasty day, and there'll still be somebody else out there.
yeah. When are you leaving?
I don't leave until the 11th of March, so we've got some time. We just went off limits and stuff last week, so um gearing up, getting ready to roll,
Gearing up. I
getting
wonder
all
if I
my
can share my
poles.
screen and like put it in Zoom. Yeah, I can.
There you go. Look at that, learning stuff. See, we're
Mhm.
teaching things on the podcast.
Look at there. Look, I can do a white. You want to whiteboard it out? Let's
I
whiteboard it
can't I
out.
can't see your screen if you're sharing it. There you are. Oh, look at there.
You want to whiteboard
That's
it
funny.
out?
That's funny.
Um, so what's going on around here?
Things are just getting ready to get going. I think the CBC is at Norman this weekend, and then the BFL's down there next weekend. They had an ABA there this past weekend. I think it took 16, I think, to win.
Yeah, they're catching
Uh,
them at Lake Murray.
yeah, I saw there's some nice, some 20-pound, I mean, a lot of 20-pound bags. I saw the BFL. I think it took 15 or 16 pounds or something to get a check in the BFL. That's really strong. I went to Jordan Saturday. Yeah, Saturday I went to Jordan, and we had, I don't know, we had somewhere probably around 19 pounds. But it was good. Just cranking.
Just cranking.
Just cranking.
When's your first bash?
April 1st and 2nd.
Is that your championship?
It's the one. It's not really a championship. It's the one we get the boat away at. Yeah.
It's not a
Uh,
championship anymore.
no, because you don't have to qualify. It's just an open tournament for anybody. Anybody can come fish,
Are you giving away a boat?
and we give away a boat. Yep. We got the Angler's Choice. We'll be kicking off March 11th and 12th at Lake Jordan. Make sure that's correct.
11th and
Yeah,
12th, are they two separate tournaments?
two separate one-day tournaments that'll get you two qualifiers in for the championship. If you fish 6 total tournaments between both divisions, you can fish the North Carolina and Virginia championship. $25,000 at each. North Carolina championship is at High Rock, and the Virginia championship is going to be at Bugs. So it's two. I think a lot of guys like both of those lakes. Those are both very good lakes. I think the weights will be really good at High Rock. We're going to do it the week, like the last weekend of October. So that ought to be a lot of fun. Fish ought to be biting again by then.
Last weekend of October.
Mm-hmm. Yep, 25K. Come get you some.
Good deal. Should we call Seth?
Absolutely. Let's call Seth. First question will be, what is your last name?
I'm gonna pause this.
Warm up a little bit.
Yeah.
Where are you at, you dude? You in your attic? You don't want your wife to know you're talking to us?
We've got a unfinished half basement, so I've got about 500.
Gotcha. God, I thought you had to go and get in your attic so she didn't know who you were talking to.
Oh, look at his
Not
little
that
tackle wall
Yeah,
there.
got a little tackle stuff going on. I like it.
Yeah,
So not only a
Yeah.
biologist, but also a fisherman.
that's right. Yeah.
I've seen him at the lake a couple of times. Yeah.
That's what we
Yeah.
all want. A fisherman that understands us.
Yeah. There's a few of us. I think there's 4 of us now. So we're spread across the state now.
So did you? So real quick, we're filming or recording, by the way. But I did want to ask you a question about kind of like how you got into biology and how you got started in that. Did you fish growing up too, or did biology lead you to fishing?
No, I was always fisherman first. So I grew up on like a 3/4 acre pond, literally 50 foot in front of my parents' house.
Okay.
So I grew up in bluegill and largemouth in there. And then
Are there any big ones?
No, never harvested it well enough.
Yeah.
So they stunted out pretty good.
Lots of little ones.
Yeah, lots of fish, but all less than 2 pounds.
Yeah.
Hey, so on that note, I hear a lot of questions. A lot of people always asking how to manage a pond. Can you give like a little quick, what to do if you want big fish in a pond?
Yeah, well, there's no one size fits all, and especially if you're fertilizing and liming, it's a total different set of methods that you should follow. But it's usually about 30 pounds per acre of largemouth that you want to be harvesting per year. So let's scale that up to a 20-acre pond. That's a good amount of fish you need to take out to have a healthy fishery. And just having some good habitat in there, but make sure it's isolated. That's what I always tell fishermen is you want it isolated for you more than the fish, because you don't want it everywhere, because the fish will be everywhere. If you isolate your little pockets of habitat, it'll be easier fishing. So
Makes sense. What about like bait fish type anything? I mean, just
yeah, if your goal is largemouth, just largemouth and bluegill, that's all you want in a pond, especially if it's real small. Don't ever put crappie in a pond. That can be the death knell for anything less than 20 acres. Yeah, just depends on your goals and how you want to manage it. But for largemouth fishing, all you want is bass and bluegill. Threadfin or any of your shad species don't really survive in a pond in the winter because they just get so cold.
yeah, makes sense. Good info. Good info.
Very
Some
good
healthy,
info. Good
healthy dose of.
question.
Corey and Ben did a whole podcast on our podcast about pond management. Probably the October episode, maybe.
Okay.
Could go over to our feed, the Two Bald Biologist feed, and look them up.
Two bald biologists.
Yeah,
Nice. That wasn't for you, and we can tell.
Nah,
like, yeah,
I'm totally opposite of them.
yeah. You got the furry biologist podcast. That's a different episode. So,
I have a question, something I want to talk about before we get into like questions. If you have a question for Seth, let us know, and I'll filter them a little bit, but we'll get those questions asked. But the thing that Brad and I were talking about before you got on was the different behaviors of bass between Florida bass and spotted bass. And what I'm learning is that there are certain species thrive in certain environments, like the Alabama bass that got in Baloo's Lake. I mean, they completely took that lake over because it fits their hunting habits. It's got those little threadfin shad. They're everywhere. It's deep, it's clear, there's not a lot of cover, it's just open water. And spotted bass are constantly moving, always. Largemouth are more lazy. They want a shallower, they want to lay next to a stump or sit in a tree. They don't want to be bothered, and they'll ambush more than actively go after food. Correct?
Yeah, and it depends on the dominant forage. You know, we're a little too far north for threadfin, and I think largemouth that feed on threadfin are a little more active, maybe.
Okay.
But you know, a lot of our lakes are dominated by gizzard shad, and they're a little more of a shad that doesn't move around as much. So I think the bass just don't have to move to chase those gizzard shad around.
Makes sense. But the thing that
Yeah.
I'm learning and what's helping me more is understanding bass behavior and why they do what they do, and where they're
Yeah.
going, trying to stay ahead of their cycles and what's
Yeah.
going to infect them. And mainly it's their environment, the food source, and how they do well. It kind of goes back to Brad's pond question. How do you grow the big ones, right? Well, you may have 10 pounders, but you're not going to have the numbers unless you got to
Yeah.
grow a lot of food.
Yeah. And the shad got to feed too, right? So
Right.
depending on plankton blooms are in the lake, the shad are going to follow where those plankton are blooming, and you know the shad will follow the plankton, and the bass will be right behind them.
So
So
what generates plankton blooms?
well, they're somewhat of a mesoplant species, I guess you call them. They're what do you call them? Like a rotifer. So they're almost in the plant family. They're like a semi-algae. I'm not sure exactly what you call them, but they're based on sunlight and water light penetration in the water. So the clearer the water, the more you'll probably have and stuff like that. So they grow
Which
like a plant.
yeah,
Is that
which again makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
is that a product possibly of like farm runoff or fertilizer stuff coming
Yeah.
down?
Yeah. Fertilizer will definitely help them out. And you can get a plankton bloom, you know, based on stuff like that, fertilizer coming in. I've heard of golf courses having a plankton bloom near them and stuff like that.
Is that why
But
golf course ponds are so good?
just you'll have algae issues. Sometimes they can go hand in hand. Plankton and algae will both bloom at the same time occasionally.
Good to learn. So when you're growing up and you're fishing in your pond, you start to get interested about bass and fishing in general and the
Yeah.
behavior of fish. I mean, is that really kind of like what you got started, was like just trying to understand why they do what they do when they do it?
Yeah. And I always just wanted to work outside in general. I did construction for a good long while in high school. So I knew I wanted to work outside. And then I really got hit by the fishing bug in freshman year of college. I joined the Clemson bass fishing team and fished with those boys. It was the second year that college fishing was ever in existence. So I traveled around for 2 years as a co-angler with them, and then got a boat in my sophomore year, into my sophomore year. Started really traveling around and got bit by the tournament bug then, and
You should be
realized
the you should be
I
the
originally,
best fisherman on planet Earth as much as you know about fish.
yeah, I wanted to be like, you know, take the Jordan Lee route and just
Yeah.
have some college success and roll that into some professional success after that. But I realized that it wasn't quite to his level.
Yeah.
And
what do you think the difference between Jordan Lee and you are? You think Jordan Lee focused more on fishing and you focused more on biology and your career path?
yeah, I was focused on, especially my summers. I was interning with the DNR at the time, and I really didn't fish a lot in the summer because I
Yeah.
was working 40 plus hours a week. Wasn't out there fishing every day in the summer.
Time on the
So
water.
yeah, I didn't have all the time on the water probably like they did, but
It's
it
important.
ended up.
I mean, it's a huge part of getting
Yeah,
better is being out there. I mean, you could say, you know, you have access to resources that Brad and I didn't have when we were getting started out. You know, YouTube's been a huge one. I talk about this all the time. There's unlimited resources now, but there's the but, right? You can
yeah,
have way too many preconceived notions in your mind based on what you consume on YouTube. So if you're watching YouTube at a certain time about a certain lake using a certain thing, you're already thinking this is what I'm going to do when I get there. And that's a huge mistake that a lot of people make, is
yeah,
you've got to have a complete blank slate, open mind, and
yeah,
just go and let the conditions and the fish dictate how you try to capture them.
yeah. and everybody thinks my job should help me with fishing, but we study population level stuff, so we're
Mhm.
really not worried about individual behaviors from a fishery management perspective. We're worried about what the whole population's doing, not individual fish. So
So
there's crossover
the
from
other thing I wanted to mention was, I just got back from Florida and we were talking about the pressure that Florida gets and the fisheries management that they do down there. And they keep opening new lakes and, they're making these factories and they're working with the biologists to open these lakes and to keep doing it because it's a huge revenue stream for Florida, especially in the wintertime with all the tournaments that they have and all the travel. If you fish in the state of I'm sorry, if you fish outside the state of Florida and you live in the Southeast, chances are you're going to make a trip or two down to Florida during the wintertime to, I mean,
yeah.
it's a 6-7 hour drive for some people that listen to this,
Yeah.
it's not that far. And, um, it generates a ton of money. There's bass boats everywhere. The fisheries are kicking them out time and time and time again, no matter how much it gets pounded. What's the difference between, obviously I'm sure they get a bunch more money than you guys get, but what's the difference between like a Florida and a North Carolina as far as how much money you guys get to be able to invest in our fisheries?
The funding question's above my pay grade for sure.
Okay.
But I can tell you the basics of how it all works. So like when you go to Bass Pro and you buy a reel, for example, I think about 10% of that cost goes to the federal government as a federal excise tax. And then that gets distributed out back to the states based on license sales. So the more freshwater licenses we sell, the more money we get from
Okay.
that tax fund.
That makes sense.
And Texas is probably 8 times the size of North Carolina or so. So they get, probably 8 times more license sales than we do.
Yeah.
So they probably definitely have more funding. And then I bet Florida has more out of state license sales than we do. And of course, the climate difference is the biggest difference as far as the fishery. So, they just have a lot bigger growing season, longer growing season, and
Lakes
rarely
everywhere.
rarely have
They don't gotta make their own lakes.
any. Yeah. So
Yeah, you could put a bass boat in pretty much you could just drive down Interstate 95 and there's probably a couple canals or lakes that I saw that I was like, I would see a boat ramp over there. I mean, you can
yeah.
But
put a
it's
boat in anything
interesting
down
though.
there.
Like if you go from like Raleigh east, we have a lot of lakes out that way that, I've never fished. I've just kind of seen them or been by them or whatever. But there's a lot of those little housing developments down around Fayetteville, Sanford area.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of the same thing. They got the little private boat ramp. And I mean, it's like a, 10, 15 acre little pond lake there. It's kind of neat. So you see a lot more east looks a lot more like Florida than it does in the Piedmont Triad area for sure.
Right. Like Waccamaw, I stopped by there one time on the way back. I've never fished it, but there were alligators that looked just like Florida fishing.
Yep.
Yeah. We've got a lot
deal.
of small water in the state, especially. We don't have any of the big reservoirs like a lot of other states are.
We have a lot more diversity too, because we got the mountains, we got the beach, we got the Piedmont. You can pretty much do anything in the state of North Carolina or catch anything.
That's right. Yeah.
Last year was except for fish grass, but we can't really say that anymore because we're starting to see some.
Yeah, I was wondering if y'all wanted to discuss that.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So Seth and I went fishing it was about a month and a half ago. I took Seth out and he wanted to see the grass. He wanted to study the fish and kind of look and see the bait. We went out and we went live scoping and Seth caught him a bunch of fish. So, Seth, I'll let you kind of talk about what we discovered and what the plan is, if there is a plan, and what you see happening to that lake, let's say, for instance, in the next little while.
Yeah, so the biggest thing to remember with any aquatic weed or any aquatic plant we got going is that every lake is going to have a different stakeholder group. So if it's a Duke lake, you're going to have potential homeowners on the lake, Duke power interest at the lake, and all kinds of stakeholders. So the management at every lake's going to be different for sure. And the management, whether it's listed on the federal government has a list of federally noxious weeds. And if it's on that list, we're the agency's tasked for managing those are going to be tasked for, basically eradication of those weeds. And it's important to remember that us, the Wildlife Resource Commission, we're not the agency of the state responsible for managing against any of the weeds out there. So there's a whole group, part of the Department of Environmental Quality. They do all the nuisance weed program and get rid of the weeds and stuff. But we saw pondweed while we were out there, and we saw another species that we got down to genus. I wasn't able to get it down to species. They were both native weeds, so no troubles there for it being something of the bad actors.
So will it continue to grow? And like I think you mentioned it was like an algae almost, and that when the water got warmer, you'd start to see it die off.
Yeah, so some of them are considered aquatic macrophytes. They're not quite a plant. They're kind of in between an algae and a plant, and they have a low tolerance to hot water. So as soon as it gets 90, 91, 92 degrees, see them start to really struggle in hot water. And that Beluga, I'm sure that's what, from May to September or October even.
Yeah, we don't have the warm water like we used to, but it still is warmer than the average lake.
Yeah. So yeah, but on the hydrilla front, we didn't see any of that out there, so that's good.
That's you say that's good.
Yeah. Well, the issue with hydrilla is I don't think many bass fishermen have fished a lake where it's not managed, so it can be very expensive to treat it and keep it at bay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be very cost prohibitive for whoever owns the lake.
And once you get a little bit of hydrilla, it does not take long to have a lot of hydrilla.
So it can grow, each individual hydrilla stem can grow like an inch per day.
Yeah.
So multiply that by hundreds of thousands of stems, and it can get out of hand in a hurry.
Yeah. And wasn't that the problem at Boggs Island?
Yeah, some of that. I'm not well versed in the Boggs Island story, but
you remember that. What was it, about 10 years ago, Staley? Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was like it got in the very back of Little Nut Bush was chock full of it. I mean, it was matted up everywhere and some of the creeks and stuff, but supposedly that was not done by wildlife. That was a homeowner thing that homeowners come together and done.
Yeah. And there shouldn't be any homeowners are usually not allowed to treat their water around their dock. They only own their dock. They don't own the lake. So if anybody out there sees, someone spraying or doing something and they don't look like they're official in an official boat, definitely.
Staley, you heard that, right? So when you get your jig hung underneath the boat dock from a bad cast, and the dock owner comes out and yells at you, because that's never happened.
Yeah,
not at all.
And Duke Power actually has a whole crew now working on aquatic weed management in their lakes. You can email them. I think it's aquaticplants@duke-energy.com.
Interesting. So
Duke Lake, you can email them to ask for ID. And
so how would like the homeowners come together to have that spray? Could they hire like some aquatic specialist that's licensed to be able to come in and eradicate that, or how does that work?
They, depending on who owns their reservoir, they'd have to work through them to get a permit, for sure.
So and some of the places have stocked the supposed sterile grass carp, and that's one of the ways that they fight it as well, right?
Yeah, and that's more of a last resort. So when they're hitting it hard with herbicides all summer and it's still growing like crazy at the end of the summer, that's when they know that maybe the carp have to come in and start to feed on it. And the bad thing for us is that carp are indiscriminate. So if we've got a habitat project going on, then the carp are going to feed on everything in the lake.
And that's where the fences y'all put up keep the right. Yeah.
So that's
Keeps the
basically
carp out of them.
not always carp, but at Harris it's carp for sure. And at most of my lakes, it's just turtles, keeping the turtles at bay.
And all we ever see them doing is just laying on a log, like 100 of them, just little turtles. Yeah.
Yeah.
They burrow under, we've noticed. So they dig little trenches under our fence.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
So the little kamikaze board over there in the corner doesn't do any good. They can just go under the
Kamikaze board.
Yeah.
Out once they're in. So they burrow under and then crawl out once they're full. Once their bellies are full and they can't get back.
Hey, look, their little fat butt's got to bury back up underneath that fence. That's what they're gonna do. Yeah, don't be just taking my grass like that.
Yeah,
no, it's amazing looking at some of those fences because some of those little fence areas that y'all have done, because some of them, and they might not be a mile apart on the lake, but some of them the grass is just completely like chalked out inside of them, and then you got another one just like I said, like a mile away. There's nothing in it,
Yeah.
And I'm sure you do different types of grass.
Yeah. And that could depend on species or even just, the little microclimate right there could be better for a certain species over another.
The microclimate. How many times have you used that phrase, Todd?
We're still the nuances of those projects for sure.
That's cool.
They're labor intensive. We're learning. Last year, I think we planted almost 4,000 plants, and that was about all we could handle for the amount of people we got doing it right now. So
I saw your videos and stuff. I mean, you guys do a good job. I mean, and we as a fisherman, I appreciate you guys working and trying to make our fisheries better for sure.
Yeah.
Remember that we're not in charge of managing against any of the weeds out there. We might process a permit or two to permit people to do that, but we are not the ones actually funding or doing any of the management against nuisance.
You catch any death threats for it
yet?
we got some pretty pretty passionate people out there when it comes to different things within the fishing industry.
Everybody has an opinion.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
The thing with hydrilla to remember from a bass fishing perspective is it can be so hard to control that grass carp usually is the last resort answer. So, and that's what I don't want in the lake is grass carp. So
why do you not want them in the lake? Because
that'll tie our hands to get in there and really do a good habitat enhancement project.
Got you. I have seen like Lake Townsend in Greensboro when we used to go up there all the time bed fishing in the spring. I have seen like a 3 or 4 carp come in. I've seen it at Jordan as well, and just fish are on the bed, and they just sit there, and the bass is running them off, and finally they just get tired. The bass swims off, and the carp just go in there and ravage the eggs.
Yeah. And those could have been common carp too. Common carp.
Gotcha.
It happens a lot at Randleman in the springtime when the fish are bedding around those reed heads and those stupid ass carp come in there and start making a mess. I'm wondering if they're screwing up the bass farm.
Yeah, probably not on a population level, but I'm sure those individual fish are affected by them.
Yeah.
I bet Randleman's full of common carp. It seems to be real flat. They love that flat, mucky habitat.
Well, McIntosh, I've seen a lot of them at McIntosh. I've seen them at Jordan, and these are all kind of flat lakes that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And Lake Townsend. So how do common carp get in there? That's just something that's in the river or creek?
Flooded the ponds.
The 1600s, probably. They were brought over from Europe. They're considered naturalized now. They've been in the U.S. for so long. I think they were originally brought over as like a food source.
We kind of consider Todd kind of like that with being in the South, sort of, sometimes.
Same thing with snakeheads, right? Snakeheads that got in the Potomac River, they were brought over.
Yeah, I don't think we'd call them naturalized yet, but I think we'd still label snakeheads as invasive or near invasive for sure.
Yeah, luckily that didn't spread too far because they need like the absolute perfect environment to thrive, don't they?
Yeah, they're not as what's the word I'm looking for?
Versatile.
They're not versatile. There you go. Not as versatile as the Alabama bass are. For sure.
This has been a word find episode. I was struggling with words earlier.
Yeah.
You always struggle with words.
It was interesting though on the snakeheads when those things first got into Potomac. I mean, I guess they've probably been in there 15 years or so now. It was like the end of the world was coming to the Potomac. I mean, it was like bad. I mean, they were going to be like chewing your dock down and coming up and staying in your house, kicking you out of your house and stuff. Snakeheads are going to be living there.
You know, if anything's a threat, it's those freaking catfish, man. They're everywhere in that place. There's a
Biggins.
trillion of them. Giants. They're all giants. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, they're
They
everywhere.
are. And those are so I caught one in a Costa up there 5 years ago. And it's like a 10-pounder. And I catch it on chatterbait, set the hook. The stupid thing comes up and jumps like 3 times. My co-angler almost killed himself trying to get to the net. And I'm like, dude, calm down. It's not a bass.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go outside any one of those grass lines on that place, and if it's a bass less than 10 inches long, it's dead instantly.
That's why they're so tight to the grass. And when they keep going back further in it when the tide comes in.
Yes, sir. All right, you ready for your Q&A, Seth?
Yeah, I think so. Sounds good.
We kind of covered this already, but where did all the grass come from in Belize, and how do we get rid of it?
Well, it's all native species, so it was probably in the rivers before the lake was even there. I forget what that is.
We had some we got some water willow too. Seth, did we look at that? It's mainly in the creeks, and it's in a couple of the pockets around the Pine Hall boat ramp, but that's starting to get, but it's staying in those areas.
Yeah, we've learned it likes more of a sandy soil. So you're going to see it more around sand and that kind of stuff. And it doesn't grow very deep. So it wants, less than 4 foot of water.
Okay.
So. Hey, with that question there, let me ask you this. Do you notice more grass showing up in lakes around boat ramps, close to in a pocket behind a boat ramp, something like that?
Yeah, here and there.
Yeah, I've seen it at a couple of places, and I know like up north, they'll actually have volunteers on the weekends that are out there. Hey, can we do an invasive grass search or
check of your
whatever?
boat.
Yeah, they just want to check your boat and your trailer and stuff.
During duck season, you might see it move around a little more because ducks can spread it around from lake to lake. If you get one little speck of it on your boat trailer, you could be moving it without even knowing it, even if you wash your boat real good. So definitely keep an eye out when you pull out of the lake and stuff like that.
And that was like going to the Potomac. The last day I pulled out after the tournament up there, you couldn't even see the tires and stuff on my boat trailer. It was just a big mat of hydrilla come out of there. It's crazy. And that stuff would get between the boat and the bunks. It had to. So there's no way you're going to get that out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where you want to try to dry it out as best you can. Get it really dry. Try not to go fishing.
I was trying to take it to as many lakes as I could back around here.
Yeah. That's a hard critter to manage though. For sure.
And when he talks about that, like I've seen lakes in Florida that you couldn't even use them unless you were in an airboat. Like you couldn't get a boat through it because it got so thick.
Yeah. And that's the situation that, especially the water companies are worried about is, if a water supply lakes get full of it like that, then it'll be, major issues for infrastructure, getting water to people's homes. So it can definitely get to that level if it's not managed.
All right.
Sweet.
Are you ready for the next one?
Yeah.
All right. Why with all this can go for any lake that's got a bunch of spotted bass in it. Why with all the bait in the lake that spotted bass have to eat, they won't grow? Also, will smallmouth live in there? Sorry, my dog's attacking me.
I assume there means Belize Creek they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's definitely too hot for smallmouth, I'll tell you that. They're more of a cool water species, so definitely way too hot for them. And then the first part of that question was what now?
With all the bait that they have to eat, the spots won't grow. So what, I know the answer to this. We talked about it when we were out there that day.
Yeah.
Why won't they get bigger than 2.5, 3 pounds?
For some reason, and we've seen this some largemouth lakes too, is they outpopulate themselves. they reproduce no matter what. No matter what their population level gets to, they're still going to reproduce and create more of themselves. And you get an overpopulation. Just like deer on a small farm somewhere, you could get too many deer and they'll all start to get small and lose weight on you. So we don't want to have too many of any species in any lake, or else you'll have a lot of fish. It'll be just like a farm pond that don't get harvested much. You'll have a gajillion fish in there, but they'll all be 12 inches long.
So what if
And
we
that's-
started killing everything we caught?
We wouldn't get rid of them for sure, but you'd definitely make them bigger. You'd see a 1 pounder turn into a pound and a halfer, and it'd just go up the chain like that. You'd probably see 2 pounders become 2.5 pounders. So the
What
more
if we
take out, the more there's room for the big ones to get a little bigger.
just told them to stop reproducing?
I don't know how we do that. Do you know how to do that?
I do not, but you said the fish they keep reproducing, they don't stop, they don't know that there's too many of them there, so maybe we should let them know, hey, little fellas, there's too many. We need y'all to stop reproducing for a couple years.
Figure that out, then
Yeah,
I could make some money. But yeah, just as with any wildlife population, you don't want it to be overpopulated, and for some reason, we're not sure exactly what drives it, but the Alabama bass in particular seem to be bad about that.
you don't think they have more spawns or better spawns or something?
Yeah, I think they can spawn a little deeper, maybe.
Yeah, because I can tell you that I see with as many spotted bass that are in that lake during spawn season, you just don't see a lot of spotted bass beds.
But up there is probably a clarity thing. The water's so clear. I mean, a largemouth can spawn deeper up there as well because the water's so clear.
But you should still be able to see the beds.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
think.
Yeah, I don't know. We've never done any hard studies on that as far as how they're better at spawning. I don't know if they're necessarily better, but they definitely are better at producing themselves. So maybe the females produce more eggs per female or something like that. I'd have to look and see if there's any data on that, but yeah.
Because there's not a lot of cover in there, so you would think that when they spawn, a lot of the spawn would be getting ate because there's not a lot that there's not enough bait with all the fish in there, so they're looking for something to eat.
And they could be, they could just not be as selective as a largemouth. Maybe they just get up and spawn wherever they want to, and then go back out to eat. Maybe eating is more of their driver than spawning, so they just pick anywhere they can to spawn and then go right back to eating.
All righty, we on to the next one?
Yes, sir.
What's the best lake to catch a 10-pounder in your region?
Oh, I have Jordan Lake, of course. So I'm always going to be partial to Jordan, but I'd say any of those three Raleigh lakes, Harris, Falls, or Jordan, there's plenty of 10-pounders in those three.
Let's talk about Jordan for a second because you have Jordan. What's that?
Couple tiny little reservoirs that I might get in trouble for sharing.
We can talk about, you and I could talk about that. We could take that offline. So let's talk about Jordan a little bit. Brad's been fishing it. I know it's been getting more popular after the Bass Pro Tour came here, when they fished Harris, Falls, and Jordan. And Jordan in particular seems lately that it's kicking out a lot of big ones. What's the balance there, and obviously it sets up a lot differently. There's standing timber. It's a shallower, dirtier lake. It's got more nutrients in it. The primary forage, I don't know what the primary forage is. I don't fish Jordan that much, but I'm definitely going to start fishing it a little bit more. But that lake's taking off in a big way.
Yeah. Yep. So the base of the food web is really good at Jordan. It's just full of good nutrients coming down. The Hall River is what's feeding most of it. So the bigger the inflow is into a lake, the more, the higher potential to have a higher fertility. And believe it or not, the more development around a reservoir, the more fertile it can be. So the more toilets you got flushing around the lake, the more fertile your lake could potentially be.
Not around Brad Staley's house.
Yeah. But where that seems to fall apart is Norman. Norman is not as high on that fertility scale.
Is
So
that just the Catawba River in general, or?
yeah, I think so. I think if you plotted it, you know, east to west, and our more fertile lakes would be in the eastern part of the state, and then it'd get more less
Interesting.
as you go west. You know,
Yeah,
clearer the water, the less fertile. Basically, is a good way to look at it.
gotcha. I guess most of those are going to be real rocky rivers or whatever in the mountains, so they don't get a
Yeah,
lot of that. Yeah,
yeah. And there's probably less ag land up there as you get in the high mountains, so they don't have as much ag runoff and stuff like that.
interesting.
And Norman has a couple dams upstream of it, so it's probably losing what it would have gotten without those dams being upstream.
Never thought about that, but yeah, I would assume the first reservoir coming into the main river system should be the most fertile, right?
Theoretically, yeah, unless there's, you know, a lot of ag development between two of the lakes, you know.
Yeah, because you think about the Yadkin chain
High
and how
Rock.
dirty High Rock will get, and
Yep.
you know
Yeah.
Baden can get dirty at times, but generally it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
But Baden
Uh,
has more of a rocky, well, except for flat swamp. Like right when you started getting a flat swamp, all the other creeks are pretty flat and shallow and dirty. Flat swamp is the only one that's really got rock in it.
yeah. And it's not necessarily the rock, you know, causing any fertility, but it's just, you know, the catchment area, what the land use in that catchment area around the lake is. If it's a lot of agriculture, you'll have more.
Hey,
in-
is Tillery or not Tillery, Tuckertown? Is that one of your lakes or?
No, that's District 6.
Gotcha.
So
We made any breakthroughs in getting rid of that snot grass?
no, and NC State's working hard on that. Every year they're doing studies, and I think they've figured out how to kill it. They just don't know how to get rid of it because it just seems to just sit there even after it's dead.
Hmm.
So that's an issue they ran into, and NC State has a whole project at Gaston actually working on managing Lingbia, and I think they're trying to figure it out and get a plan going, but still in the infancy of that right now for sure.
What are those little tiny, like if you pull up a wad of that snot grass and put it in your hand, you'll see almost look like miniature micro crawdads that are in that snot grass. Is that like crawfish? Are the crawfish spawning in there or is it different?
I doubt it. I don't know. I'd have to see it and look at a photo of whatever it was to really tell you.
Yeah, luckily we don't have it, but it is a real problem.
Yeah, it can be, and I think it goes hand in hand with algae. Wherever algae is going to grow good, it's going to grow good too. So
It's absolutely, I mean, taking over Tuckertown. I mean, Tuckertown's got it from one end to the other, and it's getting in,
yeah,
it's getting in Baden, and it's getting in High Rock as well. I mean, it's definitely spreading outward.
yeah, and NC State has been doing a lot of work on that. So hopefully, here in the next few years, we get some better management options for it. We're really kind of limited on what we can do to get rid of it entirely because you'd almost have to go in with backhoes or something to actually remove it.
Well,
To
that's
get
what
rid-
I was thinking. You know, I know it when I don't know, this is 20-25 years ago at Lake Toho, they would do Toho in Florida. They would do drawdowns and they would draw the lake down like 10 foot or something. And then they would take and just scrape the whole shoreline around the lake to get rid of the grass.
Yeah, and that can be an option for some lakes. You know, the flatter, of course, Florida, it's all flat and shallow. It'd be a lot better for them, but for us, I imagine we get a lot of equipment stuck trying to do
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it'd be tough to take a backhoe down a 45-degree bank. Remember my 45-degree bank segment, Todd?
Yeah,
Yeah.
45
Yeah.
degrees.
See? Yeah.
Yeah, well,
They'd make a lot of
that's all you
YouTube
gotta look
videos out of
for.
that. Yeah. A lot of YouTube videos being made there.
All right, next question. Talk a little bit about F1 stocking programs, where we're doing it, what we're in the process of doing it. You and I talked about this on the boat when we were out there too. If you want to just repeat that for the peoples.
Yeah, so at F1s, we're stocking Norman. I think we're doing just short of I don't want to put a number on it, but we're stocking Norman with a lot of fingerlings every summer, and we're going to continue that for the foreseeable future and see if those growth rates are definitely faster. You know, the theory behind it all is that they're going to grow larger and eat better than a traditional largemouth. So we're gonna watch those critters in Norman and see if they grow faster than your run of the mill largemouth.
We got a bunch of F1s around us, like McIntosh, Randleman.
Yeah, so we have Florida genes just about everywhere in the state. We're getting genetics back every year. We send about 3 lakes off per district per year. And we've seen Florida genetics in just about every lake. Definitely more heavy in the eastern lakes and eastern rivers even. But yeah, we've got Florida genes everywhere. But these fish we're buying for Norman are from American Sport Fish, and they're true F1 hybrids of pure crossed. You know, it's the Florida bass female and a northern bass male. So it's a true pure strain cross, and it's those progeny of those fish. So it's all an experiment right now. They proved it in small waters, less than 5 acres, but we don't know when you put them in a 30,000 acre reservoir, are they going to truly grow quicker or not? Because if they don't,
have the food too, right?
What's that?
You got to have the food source too, right?
Yeah,
you can't just throw them in anywhere. You got to have something to sustain them.
Yeah, if they don't grow any faster, they're just a largemouth in the lake, and a lot of our lakes don't need any more largemouth. We have other problem, even with some of our largemouth lakes, we're getting too many. So we want to watch Norman and see if they truly are growing any faster.
You got to think, 30, 40 years ago, people ate bass. I mean, it was a lot more people kept bass to eat. And I know you got some people that keep them now, but I'm sure it's less than 5% of the fishermen keep them.
Yeah. And everybody has more options now too, right? Like if you live in Lexington, you can drive anywhere you want just about to fish nowadays. So there might not be as much local harvesting going on at certain lakes, people going right down the road to get their dinner anymore. So we're seeing some of that come to fruition, I think.
Interesting.
That could be a whole nother episode.
All right, let's see.
The F1 stuff it's all an experiment right now. We're not certain that it's gonna work. We don't know what's gonna come of it. So
it'll work. I got faith in you.
Try to recapture those fish and see if they are truly growing faster than the other largemouth in the lake. And Norman will be a good test of that. If we can recapture them, that'll be a whole nother ball game for us.
Did y'all tag? Did y'all tag any of them or anything?
Yeah. So those first 2,000 got coded wire tags, so we know they're from that original batch. And as we get them, we can scan for that tag, and we'll know they're from that first group. And then we have the genetics from all the rest, and we can do genetics.
Is that tag implanted, or can the anglers actually see that tag?
No, it's injected in their snout, and it's tiny. Yeah,
gotcha.
It's probably covered in flesh by now. So
yeah,
basically like what they put in a store, like when you walk out and it beeps, it's just like an RFID tag to let you know.
So if any of them's trying to steal any groceries or whatever, they won't be able to do it.
Yeah.
They're such a disappointment.
But yeah, we're gonna keep an eye on Norman, and it's basically just a put, grow, and take fishery where we're gonna put them there. Hopefully they grow and let the fishermen take them from there. Whether that means take photos, take them home.
Did they kill the grass in there yet, Norman?
Well, of course, Norman's recreation city, so that's going to be a whole different.
And that's a Duke Lake as well, so Duke would manage that.
Yeah. So,
all right. So this question is, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to direct quote, but the Kerr Lake is currently in the process of being taken over by spotted bass. I don't see, because Gaston, they've been in Gaston for a while. I know this is probably it's out of your region, right?
Yeah, but I looked at it today. Actually, 2016 was the first time we saw them in Gaston.
2016. Okay. But Gaston is a different lake from like a Blues or a Norman. You've got grass, you got pads, you got more largemouth habitat there
It's
than you
flatter.
have. Yeah.
Yeah.
And bugs you do as well. So I mean, they'll probably get in there pretty good. But bugs has a bunch of bluebacks in it. And I know that the largemouth follow the bluebacks. So I'm sure the spots will too. I don't
Yeah.
think that I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not, I wouldn't worry about spots in bugs as much as I worry about it in a deep, clear
Yeah.
lake.
Yep. And if they're coming from Virginia, not coming from Norman, then they could potentially be more true spotted bass. You know,
Yeah.
they could have that Kentucky spot genetics to them. If they're true Alabamas, I don't know. I think they might just do the Norman thing and stun out.
Yeah, right. We talked about this too.
There's some,
Is how many different species of spotted bass there are. There's Kentucky's, there's Alabama's, there's Coosa River spots. They're all different.
yeah. And the more genetics we do, the more genetics, you know, we do throughout the country now on bass genetics. We're learning that there's all kinds of little endemics and stuff like that. So we think that the Alabama bass is a true endemic to the Coosa River basin of Alabama. So those fish were originally moved from the Coosa River drainage to Lanier, Lanier to the Savannah, you know, Savannah throughout just about all South Carolina now, and now up to Norman and further east. So that's the way that seems to be going. But
So the
Kentucky bass seem to be more prevalent in some of the Virginia lakes, I think.
so the Norman bass are descendants of the Coosa River spots.
Yes, that's where they get the Alabama bass name.
Gotcha. Because the Coosa spots are like, I mean, that's the ones.
And it's interesting, right? Because in their native range, they get big and they don't stun out. But you put them in a clear water lake in North Carolina, and they turn into little rats. So we're not sure what drives that. Why when you take native range, they act so differently. They just seem to want to eat all the time, and then they outcompete each other for food, it seems.
That's very interesting.
Hey, Brad, I'm going to try something real quick.
This is not going to work. Just give you a heads up myself.
Don't be so negative. I got this under control. Seth, I sent you a picture. I'm going to throw it up on the screen. This is a picture of a bass that I caught last fall at Blues. And this kind of piggybacks onto the different species and how they're breeding together. And we know that, wasn't it like 5 or 6 years ago? My timeline might be off a little bit, Brad Staley, but you would know the guy caught a record spotted bass at Norman. It was like 7 pounds, but then when they checked it out, they found out that it was actually part largemouth, so he couldn't get the record.
Yeah,
right?
largemouth DNA in it. And I mean, to me,
yeah, and there was a mean mouth or something caught at Norman too, wasn't there? I thought I heard about that.
Mean mouth is smallmouth, and that might have been James.
Yeah, does James flow? I forget where
it
that
does.
was.
James, we stopped her.
Yeah,
Did you pay your bill again this time?
Yeah, we're good. Share screen. There we go. There it is. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Look at the fish in my right hand.
Yeah.
That was 4.87. That's not an Alabama spotted bass. It didn't have teeth on its tongue. No. It's also not a largemouth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there can be variation in largemouth too, you know, depending on what the water clarity is like in the water they're in. And even your live well can change their color a little bit. That one definitely looks pretty largemouthy to me.
Yeah, see how different they look? Like that one definitely looks like a purebred, more largemouth. But this one, is it possible that the spots are mixing with the largemouths and they're gonna hopefully create this awesome, aggressive, huge, easy to catch, fast growing?
No.
We shall call it a large spot.
I rarely ever, but I'm definitely going to say never on that one. we've done a lot of genetics lately, and we don't really see them spawning with largemouth as much, and that's probably just spawning timing, right? Because I bet the Alabamas are spawning a little earlier, maybe.
Yes.
So the largemouth are probably just spawning after the Alabama bass.
That's right. We talked about that.
But smallmouth seem to really hybridize with the Alabama bass a lot, and we're worried about smallmouth fisheries going the way of the dodo because they'll just get genetically swamped out over time.
It's happening at James, right?
Yeah, it's occurring at James, and we're worried we might just be documenting the demise. We're not sure what to do about it.
Invasive species.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know why they behave so differently outside of their native range, and it's not a big native range either. But they're no good for North Carolina, it seems. And the first 10 to 12 years are great, right? Like the big fish, out of Gaston, but once you get 6 generations of fish in the lake, like once you get to Lanier's level, or there's a small lake on the Savannah chain called Russell. I think they've been in just about as long as they've been in Lanier, and it is. I remember when like 8 pounds was winning BFLs down there in Russell.
That's just above Clark's Hill, right?
Yeah, between Hartwell and Hill.
I'm going to Clark's Hill next week. So you can't say anything.
Have they been good in Russell or bad?
Bad for Russell as far as tournament weights go.
Gotcha.
Like you can get 70 fish, but the best 5 might be 7 or 8 pounds. And I think life's changing some of that too, right? I think you're seeing some of the biggest Alabamas in the lake being caught because you can target specific individuals now. I don't know if the fisheries are changing so much as the fishermen are getting better at targeting those biggest ones.
So Norman, you mentioned Norman earlier, and I've heard this from a lot of guys that live on Norman and have fished Norman their entire lives. And they say that spotted bass were the best thing ever to happen to Lake Norman, because before the spotted bass got in there, the largemouth bass fishing was really bad. Well, not really bad, but it was pretty bad. And the bags that guys are catching now are, and again, forward facing sonar technology. We have the best equipment in the world. 17, 18 pounds of fish was unheard of before spotted bass got in there for many years. I know lakes go through cycles, but it does seem like spotted bass have helped that lake, and I'm sure the bait fish, etc., the food source is getting better too.
And for largemouth, of course, it's what we call littoral habitat. So that habitat in less than 8 foot of water, basically. Norman lacks a lot of that outside of docks and rocks and stuff. So it's definitely not the best largemouth lake to begin with. But I don't know if the answer to get out of that was to put Alabamas in the lake either.
Probably not,
because they've done there.
But it does seem like the timing, for whatever reason, as soon as they got in there, the lake started to get better and better and better and better.
It was, just a couple bad spawns or something the largemouth had. And then, just going through a little rough patch, and people couldn't wait on it to get over. I don't even know. What was that? The 90s probably? Or was that later than that? I think the first Alabama showed up in the 2000s.
Yeah,
I was only like 12 years old.
Brad was 40 at that point.
Yeah. No, the rumor mill was that they started being put in there in like the mid 90s. And they were coming out of Alabama when they got put in there. So they've been in there. If that's true, they've been in there for what, 20 years now.
How'd they get put in there?
There was a tournament
Somebody
trail.
threw them in there.
There was a large, used to be a regional, or it was bigger than regional. The large tournament trail that used to travel around, and this guy had the big tanks, and they would go down in Alabama and run tournaments, and they would just fill up the tanks and bring them back up here from those tournaments. Release fish.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, That's not. We
That'll do
definitely
it.
do not want anyone doing that anymore. Please do not move them fish. If, if you catch it and take it home, it'll be good for the lake for sure. But don't release it.
Yeah, catch 10 of
Take-
them. And
Don't release it anywhere else, please.
that's
I'm lucky as far as my district goes. I don't think we have any yet.
I don't know
But
how well they would do. Like Jordan's just not a spot type
Yeah.
lake.
that's a
Yeah.
great. I hope I don't have to answer that question, but
Yeah, and hopefully the fishing is good enough down there now that and people have seen what happens when you put them in places
Yeah.
that'll
Yeah.
keep people from doing it. But there'll be somebody, man, I like catching spots, man.
yeah, they're more predictable, right? They're like you can have your own little honey holes to go to, so I can see that side of it. But if you like big stringers of bass, you don't want them for sure. I remember when Hartwell 17 pounds a good bag now, but I remember Hartwell used to be 24 to 26 pounds in Hartwell. It was like a
Really?
good tournament stringer.
Well, Murray, we were talking about this before you come on. Murray down there is fishing out of this world, you know.
Yeah, and Murray's a little different. I think the striped bass compete with the Alabamas a little more. So any lake that you can get stripers to survive and get them to really be forage competitors with the Alabamas.
How come? That's
We
interesting.
we struggle to grow stripers like some of the other reservoirs do.
Well, Blues Creek seems perfect for striped bass, and there's none of them in there.
Yeah, it gets too hot.
Too
So
hot?
stripers hate hot because they're naturally a saltwater fish.
Yeah.
They're supposed to go back to the ocean, spend the summer in the ocean, then come back in the spring to spawn. So when they get landlocked by a dam, they struggle in that hot water.
What about hybrids?
Hybrids are a little less prone, a little more tolerant to hot water, but even hybrids can really, really get hit by it.
Can
Is there
hybrids reproduce on their own, or are they all stocked?
No, so any reservoir that we consistently have hybrids, we stock them just about every summer.
You stock
Little
them in
three-
Ocala?
Yeah, Ocala gets 3,500 or so every summer.
Yeah, there's a bunch of
And
them in there. That must be how they got in Randleman.
Yeah, Mycko has an awesome little hybrid fishery up there near Virginia. We were just gilling it in there last month, right before Christmas time. We caught some like 6-pounders.
So what is the benefit of stocking the hybrids? Why do y'all do that? Is it like a bait management thing, or?
No, it's just a put, grow, and take fishery, just to have another fish out there. They don't really interfere with anything else, so it just adds another fishing resource. Especially if you don't have a pelagic fish like Mycko just had largemouth and bluegill and all those fish. So we just added a new fishery to the lake.
Did you get live scope yet, Seth?
Not yet. I'm about to be in between boats. As soon as I get the Stranger sold, I'm hopefully going to order a new boat if I can keep the wife talked into it.
Good for you.
That's why you're in the attic.
Got her talked into. Every time I say $70,000, she's like, 70 what?
Yeah.
I have that same response when I see the prices.
Yeah, it's not great. Well, hey man, we appreciate you hanging out with us for a little while. We know your time is valuable, and we've already coming up on an hour.
Yeah.
So
And just one more thing for the
for
listeners. The Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, AFTCO, and the Friends of Reservoirs, they all have small grant opportunities for bass clubs. So you can Google those organizations and look at their grant opportunity. Contact us for any of your local lakes you want to work on. You can get up to like $5,000 to do artificial fish habitat, or maybe even do a small aquatic weed project like we do on Ocala or something like that. So we can't apply those. So that has to be started at the club level.
Is there any like retailers that are very kind of conservation friendly or whatever that donate to you guys or help out in any way?
Yeah, AFTCO has really stepped up. I think they're throwing some money at our new greenhouse we're going to be building in the next couple of years. Our assistant chief has been working with them on that. And every year there seems to be another company pop up. But yeah, AFTCO is the big one right now.
Good deal. Good for AFTCO.
thank you, AFCO. When are we gonna go shocking? It's getting around that time. I'll be
Yeah.
back right at probably March 3rd or 4th.
Okay.
I don't leave again
It'll be
until like April 14th. So
the end of March will probably be about the time to get going.
okay.
As soon as the water 58, 59, we can get out there.
When do
Is that
you
because the fish pull up shallow then?
Yeah, it's just because we can't catch them in less than, in more than 8 foot of water, so they've got to be up there where we can get to them.
do you pre-plan which lakes you're gonna survey?
Yep.
Where are you
So
going this year?
we're going to Oak Hollow, Mickey in Durham, Tiny Reservoir in Durham, and we're gonna do Camac here in Alamance County.
I want to go to the one on Oak Hollow. I think that would be
Okay.
fun.
Yeah, we can set that up. I might even try to plan that one to be closer to the true spawn. So if we can go in April, that might be about the time that
Yeah.
first weekend.
Yeah, that would be
Sure.
great.
Where most of the fish are in that spawning zone.
They
Do you
spawn
notice-
shallow on that lake too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do y'all do the whole lake, or do y'all have certain zones that y'all do?
Yeah, we randomize 500-meter stretches of shoreline just throughout the whole lake. Anywhere we can get the boat. And I've had the boat in like 8 inches of water before.
Say 500 meters. Staley's too dumb. He doesn't understand the metric system.
About
That
1,000.
there you go. That's interesting. So you notice like some banks better than others and things for sure have more fish on them.
Yeah, and even like arms of the lake. I don't know if it's just timing based on when we're there, but it seems like, especially at Jordan, some of the arms, the haul might be doing better than the Beaver Dam Creek area or something like that, or vice versa. And that just could be timing.
Shallow, flat, north facing.
Yeah.
Something vertical to get around. Typically hard bottom. That's what you want to look for, yes?
Yeah, pretty much. And that some lakes, having some laydowns is a really good thing. Like Lake Lucas and Ashboro, we caught so many fish around all them laydown trees in that lake. So
Staley fishes that lake, don't you?
I've been there a few times. That lake used to be unreal. There was a lot of double digit fish caught out of that lake, when I in the 90s that I heard about, read about, and seen and stuff.
yeah,
Had some massive crappie in it as well.
that could be our next episode. Is why is that? Why are those lakes starting to change, and you're not seeing those giants come out of those little lakes anymore?
So why is that? The age of the lake?
Theory on that. And I think harvest has a lot to do with it.
Can I take a shot at that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it's bass fishermen don't keep fish. There's you can numbers, and the habitat can't support what the fish population is.
Yeah.
It's out of
nailed
whack.
it. Yeah.
It's simple. It's just like human beings. You need food to grow. You need to reproduce, and you have to have the right environment to do that, to thrive.
Yeah. Or deer on a.
Yep.
I always bring it right for fishermen. Most fishermen are hunters too, so I always bring it right back to deer, where you want to cull out your deer herd to keep them big. So similar concept.
Yep.
There's
All right,
not
Seth.
much culling.
We appreciate you, sir. We appreciate everything you do. I will get a hold of you when I get back from South Carolina in about 2 weeks. And I look forward to doing this. I'm definitely going to film it. We'll get a GoPro video and we'll check it out. I look forward to it.
Yeah, do that for sure. Sounds great.
All right. Thanks, Seth.
Thanks, Seth.
There you go. I like Seth, and I like the fact that he's reaching out and trying to, get with the club guys and start working with people, because that's who he is. I think he's a very positive person to have in his position.
Absolutely. Anytime you got a fisherman in a position like that, that's a good thing. At least somebody looking out for our resources and our interests.
Interesting what he said. A lot of it makes a lot of sense as you get out towards the east. That was something that I hadn't really thought about before. the water become, or the feeder creeks become more fertile. I haven't really fished out much that way. I had to fish the Trenton Neuse Rivers one time, and I had to fish the Albemarle Sound one time, and that was crazy. But I haven't really. There hasn't been a need. They don't have any really big tournaments to get out there, but it is different. It's very cool to fish out that way.
Yeah, I know. I sold a boat to a kid close to Wilmington one time, and we went to one of those little lakes down there. And it may have been that Waccamaw or Waccamaw, whatever
Yeah.
that you were talking about. But I
Mhm.
mean, I looked at it on Google Earth before we went. It was like a little baby Okeechobee. It was just a perfect
Yeah.
little circle,
Yep.
and just had reeds all the way around the
Yep.
outline of the lake. You know,
Yep. Yeah, it was
just
cool. We
all
were
those.
coming back from the beach one time, and I'm like, I know you want to get home, but I want to go check this place out. We drove around it, and there was alligators swimming out there, and I mean, it looked like a lake in a Florida lake. So I know they catch them out there, but they don't. I don't think they catch a lot of 8-10 pounders. I don't. I just don't know if it's the food source or what, but seems like they catch 4s, 5s, and 6s, but they look different. They got that
Yeah, there's a
real
lake in
solid
Wilmington.
dark color.
There's a lake in Wilmington, just outside of Wilmington, called Sutton Lake, and I think it's a hot water discharge lake.
Mm-hmm.
And they catch some big stringers down there. I mean, they catch some 30-pound bags down there. But I think it's kind of in wintertime where the discharge coming out, there's like a ditch or something in front of it. I think they catch them out of that ditch where they get in.
I know the Roanoke. There's a bunch of
Roanoke's got
guys.
some big ones.
Yeah, I've heard some things about Roanoke out that way.
So the thing with the rivers down there, a good friend of mine lives that way, and they haven't had any major hurricanes in like 10, 15 years or something down that way. And what happens when the hurricane comes through, it floods all the swampland around it, farms and all that runoff, all that bad water from the swamps gets in the river, takes all the oxygen out of it, and it kills the fish. They have major fish kills. They haven't had that in a long time. So you're seeing those rivers fish as good as they have in, 30, 40 years.
For bass.
For bass, yes.
Haven't the striped bass numbers gone way down?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
I think that's across the board because Brian Schmidt, he guides up in Chesapeake, and he said the same thing.
Well, that used to be like the world-renowned striped bass fishing was Chesapeake Bay in the spring whenever they would come in there. I mean, they caught like 60, 70-pound fish up there.
Yeah.
Because that's where all the fish off the ocean would come in to spawn.
Yeah.
They would go up the bay. And I don't think it's anything like what it used to be.
Should we talk about a tip? Because I did do a video today, so check out, please like and subscribe my Facebook page. It's Todd Walters Fishing. I'm gonna start posting more on there. I did hire a social media company to help me with some things, so there should be a bunch more content out there. It's something I'm buying a little slack on, but I did put a video out there today. And I was thinking about this because I was going through my boat and trying to get rigged up for Clark's Hill. And I noticed my prop from being in Florida on my trolling motor was a little bit dinged up. And Garmin wasn't there on our off day. So I had to file down my prop. And I kept remembering, I went to the James River last year and just destroyed my prop. And I had that prop on there for far too long after I had nicked it up, and you can hear it in the water. Like you can hear the high pitched noise that it makes when you have a lot of dings in your trolling motor prop. And with those fish, like Seth said, once the water temperature starts to get in the upper 50s, low 60s, those fish are going to be in less than 5 feet of water. They're going to want to get ready to spawn. And by filing down your prop and by getting the burrs off of it and then sanding it down and having a good smooth clean edge on your trolling motor prop is really important in the springtime when you're, especially on calmer days. It can make a big difference in your fish catch based on your trolling motor. And just keep those props, keep a nice good sharp edge on it, and make sure that everything is functioning properly and tight. When you're hitting your foot paddle, you're not making noise, because those fish, when they first get up, they're really, really skittish. So anyway, that was my tip. Keep your trolling motor props clean and sharp and balanced.
Nice.
What do you got, Staley?
So what I have done over the last week, I took all my rods and reels out of the boat, and just went through each of my rods and checked guides just for cracked tips, took a Q-tip and run through them. And I will say that it's way harder to do now with micro guides than it used to be with full size guides.
Yeah.
But I actually found 5 rods that had broken like seats, the guide seats, the guide post, or the ceramic. And 2 of the rods was rods that I used all the time. And I had no idea. You can't feel it with your hand, but if you take and run that Q-tip through there, if you do it just right, it'll like catch the Q-tip. You can feel resistance on it. And I looked at it with a magnifying glass and the ceramics busted on it. And it's the end tip, the guide or whatever. So that's one that the line, you know, just it's a good time of year to do stuff like that, getting everything ready to go.
Yeah, I agree. Today I picked up one of my spinning poles today, and my guide was starting to work loose of the thread, so I had to go on and tighten a couple of them up and just wrap a couple, you know, I keep rod guide wrap in my boat, and if I have a guide, yeah, you can use braid too. No, it's not sewing thread, dumbass. And wrap it really tight and get it nice and tight so those guides don't break loose.
You also crochet when things are slow. You use the same stuff in the mornings before blast off.
I don't know how to crochet.
Watch a YouTube video. I'm sure there's something out there. Maybe you make one. Make one. That's how you're gonna get your viewers up,
Learn
man.
how to
Stop.
crochet.
Yeah, learn how to crochet. Start doing fishing and
Sure,
crochet.
that is not how I would get viewers. Who the hell would watch that?
Aunt Betty wants to see
Aunt
that.
Betty isn't going on YouTube. No, sir. All right. Well, that's all I got. We'll do this. I guess when I get back from Clark's Hill, or we can do one before, whatever you want. I guess when I get back.
Yeah, when you get back, we don't have much going on between now and then. Everything's fixing to get going wide open. So, you know, show us some tag some, you know, catch some fish, show us some big fish. Tag us in Facebook and stuff, social media.
That's all I got. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.